June 3rd, 2026, just past midnight. The Persian Gulf is burning. Not metaphorically, actually. Over the span of a single night, Iran launched 13 ballistic missiles and multiple attack drones across 3 countries, Kuwait, Bahrain, and Qatar, targeting U.S. military installations and civilian infrastructure in what local authorities are calling Iranian aggression. Kuwait International Airport took a direct hit. Terminal 1, which had only fully reopened 2 days earlier, now has a gaping hole in its roof. Fuel storage tanks are on fire. 25 ambulances rushed to the scene. The toll? 1 civilian dead, an Indian national, 63 wounded, head trauma, cerebral hemorrhages, amputations. Bahrain's sky lit up with interceptor missiles as 3 Iranian ballistic missiles screamed toward the U.S. Fifth Fleet headquarters. Air defense sirens blared across the capital. Residents were told to shelter immediately. The United States responded within hours, launching self-defense strikes on Iran's Keshem Island, targeting a military ground control station. But here's what almost every news outlet is missing. Before I show you why this single night of attacks changed the rules of this war permanently, hit that subscribe button. This is war conflict. We don't just report the news, we decode the strategy behind it. And the strategy Iran just executed is unlike anything we've seen before. Stay with me. Let me give you the complete picture of what happened that night. Kuwait. The Kuwaiti armed forces detected and engaged 30 hostile ballistic missiles and drones throughout the night. Defense Ministry spokesman Colonel Saud Abdulaziz al-Atwan confirmed that 13 ballistic missiles entered Kuwaiti airspace. Air defense systems intercepted most, but debris fell across residential areas. 1 drone got through, striking Terminal 1 of Kuwait International Airport. The damage was catastrophic. Kuwait's Civil Aviation Authority suspended all flights. Diplomatic missions in the area were also damaged. Bahrain. 3 ballistic missiles were fired toward Bahrain. Unlike Kuwait, Bahrain's air defenses, working in coordination with U.S. forces, intercepted all 3. But the psychological impact was immediate. Emergency sirens sounded across the capital. Citizens were ordered to shelter. Airspace was shut down. Qatar. U.S. Central Command confirmed that Iran also launched drones toward U.S. forces in Qatar. Those were shot down before reaching their targets. The Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps claimed responsibility hours later. In a statement on their official Telegram channel, the IRGC said they had successfully struck the Ali al-Salem airbase in Kuwait, which hosts U.S. helicopters, as well as the headquarters of the U.S. Fifth Fleet in Bahrain. But here's where the stories diverge. U.S. Central Command offered a completely different assessment. According to CENTCOM, 2 Iranian missiles fired at Kuwait fell short or broke apart in flight. 3 missiles aimed at Bahrain were immediately intercepted. And then CENTCOM added something extraordinary. They said all failed to hit their intended targets. But a civilian is dead, an airport is damaged, 63 people are hospitalized. That's not failure, that's success by a different measure. So who is telling the truth? Both of them. And that's the problem. This is where the story gets strategically interesting. The United States defines success as, our military bases were not hit, our personnel were not harmed, therefore the attack failed. Iran defines success as, we struck 3 countries in a single night, we closed an international airport, we killed an enemy national, we made the entire Gulf feel vulnerable, therefore the attack succeeded. Both are correct. And that tells you everything about how this war is now being fought. Because Iran didn't need to hit a U.S. barracks to win the night. They needed to prove they could hit anything at all, and they did. The Washington Examiner reported that the attack was one of the most damaging attacks since the ceasefire. The New York Times noted that this was the first reported fatality in a Gulf state since the ceasefire in April. That's significant. For nearly 2 months, the Gulf had felt safe. Airports operated normally. Civilians went about their lives. That night ended. Let me give you the numbers that the mainstream coverage isn't running. Iran's ballistic missiles. Each one costs between $100,000 and $500,000. Their attack drones, like the Shahed models used in the strike on the airport terminal, cost approximately $20,000 each. Total Iranian expenditure for this operation, roughly $2 to $3 million. The damage inflicted? 1 dead, 63 wounded, An international airport shut down for hours. 3 nations placed on high alert. A U.S. retaliatory strike that cost millions more. And a psychological message delivered to every Gulf capital: you are not safe. That ratio is roughly 1 to 100. Iran spent $1 for every $100 of damage and disruption they caused. But here's what makes this different from the AWACS shootdown we covered in a previous video. With the AWACS, Iran proved they could destroy a specific $500 million asset. That was a surgical demonstration. With this multi-front attack, Iran proved something arguably more dangerous. They proved they can strike 3 countries simultaneously, overwhelm air defense systems through sheer volume, and inflict damage that forces entire nations to shut down, all for the price of a single F-35 flight hour. Everyone is asking, why did Iran attack Kuwait and Bahrain? The real question is, what trap has Iran set for the United States and its Gulf allies? Because here's the trap. The Gulf states have traditionally relied on the U.S. military to protect them from Iran. U.S. bases in Kuwait, Bahrain, and Qatar are the backbone of regional security. But those bases are also why Iran is attacking them. Iran's foreign ministry made this explicit. They said, and I quote, "Any country that permits aggressor parties to use its territorial, maritime, or airspace, or the facilities and bases located within its territory, to carry out or support military aggression against Iran is in clear violation of the fundamental rules of international law." In plain English, if you host U.S. troops, you are a target. This creates an impossible situation for Gulf nations. Option 1. Continue hosting U.S. forces. Enjoy American protection from Iran, but accept that your airports, ports, and cities will be Iranian targets. Option 2. Ask U.S. forces to leave. Remove the Iranian target from your territory, but lose the security guarantee that has kept Gulf monarchies safe for decades. Neither option is good, and Iran knows it. The GCC Secretary General, Jassim Mohammed al-Budaiwi, called this what it is, an unacceptable hostile policy that threatens the security and stability of the region. But condemnation is not a strategy, and Iran is banking on the fact that Gulf nations will eventually crack under the pressure of repeated attacks. The United States did not sit idle. Within hours of the Iranian attacks, U.S. Central Command announced they had conducted self-defense strikes on an Iranian military ground control station on Qeshm Island. Qeshm Island sits in the strategic Strait of Hormuz, the narrow passage through which 20% of the world's oil flows. The U.S. struck Iranian military infrastructure there in retaliation for the attempted attacks. This is significant. Direct U.S. strikes on Iranian soil are rare. Each one risks escalation toward full-scale war. But the U.S. is in an impossible position. If they don't respond, Iran is emboldened. If they respond too forcefully, the fragile April ceasefire collapses completely. And meanwhile, the Gulf Arab states are watching. The UAE, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Egypt, and Jordan all condemned Iran's attacks. But privately, their leaders are asking hard questions about whether hosting U.S. bases is worth the cost. The New York Times put it perfectly. The Gulf states have been dragged into a conflict with a neighboring country that they had hoped to avoid through diplomacy. Iran has achieved something remarkable. They have made their own isolation a weapon against their neighbors. Nobody is talking about what happens to Kuwait International Airport in the long term. Kuwait had been hit before. The airport had only fully resumed operations on June 1st, just 2 days before this attack. 2 days. That means Kuwait spent months repairing damage from previous strikes. They restored normal operations. They convinced travelers that the airport was safe. And within 48 hours of reopening, they were shut down again. The maintenance math here isn't about military hardware. It's about national resilience. How many times can a country rebuild its primary international airport before the cost becomes unsustainable? How many times can you tell your citizens that the airport is safe before they stop believing you? How many airlines will continue flying to a destination where their planes might be damaged by missile debris? Iran doesn't need to destroy Kuwait's airport permanently. They just need to keep it closed, or make its operation so expensive and unreliable that it ceases to function as a normal international gateway. And the same logic applies to Bahrain's ports, Qatar's air bases, and every piece of infrastructure that keeps Gulf nations connected to the world. Here's the thing. The most expensive thing Iran destroyed on June 3rd wasn't the terminal roof at Kuwait International Airport. It wasn't the missile debris that scattered across residential neighborhoods. It wasn't even the 63 wounded civilians recovering in hospitals tonight. It was the assumption that the Gulf is a safe place to live, work, and travel. Because until that night, there was a sense, however fragile, that the ceasefire had drawn some lines, that civilian infrastructure was off limits, that airports were not battlefields. Iran just erased those lines. And worse, they did it across 3 countries simultaneously. They forced Kuwait to shut its airport. They forced Bahrain to activate its emergency sirens. They forced Qatar to scramble its air defenses. They proved that no Gulf nation hosting U.S. forces can consider itself safe. The United States can retaliate. The Gulf nations can condemn. The world can watch. But the damage is done. Not to the buildings. Those can be rebuilt. The damage is to the idea that there are sanctuaries in this war, that if you stay away from military bases, if you avoid political entanglements, you can remain safe. Iran just proved you cannot. And that lesson will echo through every Gulf capital, every emergency planning meeting, every conversation about whether to send children to school or book a flight, or invest in a region that can be shut down by a $20,000 drone. Iran launched ballistic missiles at U.S. military bases in Kuwait and Bahrain in a single night, and Tehran just turned 3 entire countries into a war zone, not by occupying them, not by conquering them, but by proving that nowhere in the Gulf is beyond the reach of Iranian weapons. That's not a military victory. It's something more insidious. It's a psychological one. And the war isn't ending. It's just finding new ways to make everyone feel unsafe. I'm War Conflict. Subscribe. Because next time, the drones could be coming for somewhere closer to you.